Hello and welcome to another edition of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. Hi, Marina.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
Yes, I'm all right. You've sort of been on the tour of the all the different politicians this week.
I've been on the tour.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been on the election trail. I've been around the country, and that will continue as we lurch or skip towards July the 8th. I'm so sorry, July the 4th. It's sooner than I think. Thank God for that.
But no politics on this podcast. There's
Absolutely
enough politics out there, isn't there?
Yeah, we're going to mention the US Attorney General, but that's it. We're not mentioning anything with the US either. So we will mention the Attorney General, but it's a small ghettoised thing about ticketing.
Talk about the US Attorney General for 2 hours, absolute max.
Oh, yeah.
No more than that.
Big Merrick Garland fans on this show.
Yes. So, yeah, we're talking about Ticketmaster and their sort of near monopoly of ticket sales and why we pay so much for tickets and so on.
Yes.
We're also talking about
the return of Loaded magazine in one form or another.
Which would be nice for 80% of our audience will find out what Loaded is.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Right back when, near at the start of this podcast, we talked about Netflix releasing their viewership data for the first time, and that was the first 6 months of last year, and they've just done the second 6 months of last year. So we'll have a look at what the first global TV channel, what we're all watching on it.
Exactly, and also maybe compare and contrast with what's happening at cinema, which we've also talked about recently.
Yes.
But we'll start, shall we, with Ticketmaster.
We'll start with Ticketmaster. The Attorney General in the US, Merrick Garland, has...
I love that guy.
It's a great... love that guy. Has launched a monopoly suit against Ticketmaster, trying to say for an opening bargaining position anyway, saying they need to break it up because they control everything and ticket prices are too high and it's in their interest to act for the consumer. And there is, in general, a lot of anger about ticketing, including in this country, which we'll also talk about because one of Labour's... Oh, sorry, it's not a totally politics-free zone, is it? Because one of Labour's proposals for the election is to cap secondary ticketing, like resale, basically, at 10% over face value, which they already do in some other European countries. Again, which is a sort of supposedly has the consumer in mind.
I mean, that's going to make my mind up on July the 8th, that's for sure.
We mustn't be 4 days late for the election.
Can you imagine?
We must not be 4 days late.
Listen, it's better that we're 4 days late than Alistair and Rory are 4 days late.
That's dropping the ball.
Yeah.
We can drop the ball in other ways, though. But
so shall I say how Ticketmaster started? People, I think, are slightly confused as to what Ticketmaster do, how they make their money, why they make their money. They know they hate them, and they know they're paying them a lot of money. But it was a sort of a genius business decision in the 1970s, really. Theatres and concert halls used to sell their own tickets because if you think about it, if there's a gig, you've got the band or the act and you've got the venue and those are the people you imagine are making all the money.
Yeah.
And the little stuff of paper in the middle, which is a ticket, you think, well, that isn't anything.
No.
Right, that's just a ticket.
A record of a transaction between us two.
Yeah, it's a receipt, essentially. And that's all it used to be. Then a company called Ticketron started setting up little, kiosks in major stores. And they would say to the theatres, you pay us 25 cents every time we sell a ticket for you. And the theatres thought, okay, I can sort of see that. That kind of works for us. Someone else taking care of all that business. And people would put their credit card details into a machine and take the tickets out. Ticketmaster came along, a guy called Fred Olson, and it completely turned it on his head. He thought, I'm not going to get the theatres to pay me. He said, I'm going to pay the theatres. I'm going to say to the theatres, if you let me have absolute exclusive control of your ticketing, I will give you 50% of what I make, or 40% or 30%, depending on what the theatre is. So he turned the whole thing around. The theatres went, well, this is great. We don't have to worry about the ticketing at all because that's a hassle. We're getting a bit of extra revenue as well. Of course, we'll sign up with this company, Ticketmaster. So Ticketmaster did exactly that. Their job was they controlled the tickets. They could charge pretty much what they wanted, and they would give a proportion of their profit to the theatre. So that's how Ticketmaster made their money. That's how they continued to make their money. That's why they're the people in charge of pricing, and that's why they're the people who pretty much any big gig or big theatre you go to, Ticketmaster are the people you deal with. But then they went a step further. This
is in 2010 when they acquired Live Nation. Now, Live Nation sort of ran the venues and they were involved with promotion and all these sorts of things. And so basically what that meant was that Ticketmaster suddenly became this everything corporation where they control the entire entertainment supply chain, where you've got that they're controlling the artist management in a way, concert promotion, venue management, ticketing, and in the US they do a lot of secondary ticketing as well, resale. And people obviously quite swiftly started to hate them for a number of reasons. But the big flashpoint of course, once again, she is at the centre of it. When the Taylor Swift tickets were released last year, the Ticketmaster, and you could only get them through Ticketmaster, of course, because it's...
Yeah, and by the way, that's interesting because she's the most powerful woman in entertainment. And even she and the AEG group, who are her promoters, they could not get past this because all the biggest venues had exclusive deals with Ticketmaster. She couldn't book her tour without
there would be nowhere for her to
Ticketmaster.
play.
Yeah.
So the Ticketmaster website crashed, which, I mean, people were stuck for, people were in queues for sort of 10 or 12 hours. They took days off work to do it. I mean, it's enormous. And they also have discovered that, there are bots that can do 1,000 tickets. This is the trouble, you see. There's software that can...
Scalping.
Scalping bots. There's about 10 different varieties of these scalping bots that can do 1,000 tickets a minute, a couple of them doing 15,000 tickets a day. And then it's immediately like a 7,000% resale. And the head of the FTC, Biden's Federal Trade Committee, is a woman called Lena Khan, and she said that this catastrophe converted more Gen Zers into anti-monopolists overnight than I ever could. And so people went nuts about this, that they couldn't. And so once again, it was such a big flashpoint that they've been talking about this for a long time, actually, trying to break them up, or maybe that's their starting position, as I say, that they'll break them up. But I think it is slightly more shaded, as always, as a story. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what people love to. People like to hate for Ticketmaster, and the artists love to say, "Oh, you've paid." Can I just come up with a random number? Say you've paid £50 for a ticket, but why do I get to the end of it and discover I'm paying £100 when I've been on this website for hours and hours trying to do this? And then at the end, it's like, oh, you're not going to take the ticket because it's all these fees. And people are thinking, oh, that fee's going to Ticketmaster. By the way, we know that fee goes in some part to the artist, and the big artists. Sometimes,
sure.
Not okay. The big artists, right?
the big artists.
The big artists love having Ticketmaster there. It's a little bit like, it reminds me a little bit like when Boris Johnson had people like Gavin Williamson in his cabinet. You love Gavin Williamson in the cabinet because if they're talking about Gavin, they're not talking about you. So everyone's saying, oh my God, Ticketmaster is such arseholes. No one's saying Ariana Grande's an arsehole. She's like, yeah, I know the tickets are really high. What can I do? I'd love them to be 50. Would you? Would you actually? Because they're a useful person for everyone to, and they, they're the lightning rod and they've taken all the hate. They actually say we make a tiny amount of money, but they don't. And actually the way bits of their business make lots more. And when they're saying we make 1.4% or something, they're foregrounding little bits of their business that they can say that about, which are loss leaders for the big stuff where they do make huge amounts.
Sometimes they charge you £2.50 to print out your tickets at home.
Yeah.
That I've never worked out. Like they're paying for the upkeep of my printer.
Yes, exactly. Will I have this? Will I get this in some sort of check in the post?
Yeah,
Will it
exactly.
come to me? Yeah. So they are useful, but first of all, who knows who's going to win the election? This seems to me quite an election year play, by the way. I'm sorry, we're not. Why are we talking about politics? But it is quite. But it's such a consumer-facing thing, like saying, "Oh, poor you! You're spending too much for all your fun stuff. We're going to do something about it." We're finding it quite hard to break up big tech, so we'll just do this instead.
We'll do Ticketmaster instead of Facebook.
Yeah, I don't believe that this will get passed on to consumers. I don't think it's going to be cheap to get tickets at all. Aspects of it may work better if you break it up, or if you take away some parts of the business, and it may work better. But if you're asking me whether that notional ticket, I would just said will come down to £50. No, I don't think so.
Well, there are rivals to Ticketmaster, and they pretty much charge the same amount each time as well. Because
some of those rivals may come in. They may have to say you can't monopolise venues any longer. You're going to have to allow some of the rivals to have some of the tickets, etc. But
exactly, listen. If the market is that tickets cost a certain amount, and the big artists are selling out time after time after time, which they are, because there's huge demand now for live performances, then there is nothing in anyone's interest really to reduce the price of those tickets, apart from possibly the artists. So that's the only place you could go with that, is for an artist to find a way to team up with a ticket retailer or a series of venues where they could suddenly charge an awful lot less, because there's still money in it if you do charge.
Taylor Swift can do this.
She could have, but it was fascinating even then.
As a turbo capitalist, will she? I don't think so. I mean, secondary ticketing, which I have got some Taylor Swift tickets. They have cost me slightly more than the opening weekend domestic box office for Mad Max Furiosa, but it didn't open very well, as I predicted.
But yeah, by the way, I loved it.
You saw it?
Yeah, I saw it. I loved it. But just like Fall Guy, listen, we'll talk about that. I think we might talk about it a bit during the Netflix section. But yeah, that's two absolutely great movies, and I couldn't care less what either of them made. I would go and see both, but it's really good.
Okay, if you're comparing it with the Fall Guy, you're denigrating it, I think. But anyway, we'll move on. Sorry, where were we? Oh yes, the Taylor Swift
You
tickets.
were buying Taylor Swift
I was buying
tickets.
Taylor Swift tickets. I was buying Taylor Swift tickets for slightly more than the opening box office of Mad Max Furiosa, and I got mine from Viagogo and with StubHub. They've got the whole thing sewn up now. Labour are trying to bring the prices down, as I say, on resale because to 10% above face value. I know lots of Americans connected with our the show that we've just finished making are coming to Europe with their one daughter to watch Taylor Swift because you can get a ticket in Madrid for they've got a price cap on it. People going to Sweden, you're not allowed to do London. You are allowed to sell it for a lot more than face value. I mean, huge amounts more than face value. If you look at these websites and what it would cost, I'm not even in the same postcode as Taylor Swift. By the way, I'm technically in Wembley Stadium, but it's very unclear whether we will be able to see her, even with the binoculars, which we're taking. Genuinely, we are taking our binoculars.
I always used to because my eyesight.
Yeah, well, I mean,
everything.
I don't care. Violet's like, "Can you wear them?" I said, "Yeah, no, it's fine. I'll be on call."
Yeah,
just pass them over to you.
Please stop calling them opera glasses.
Yeah. My lorgnette. Anyhow, but so actually Labour are trying to sort of bring this thing down. Now, there is a lobbying group. I have to say I love a lobbying group. There's a lobbying group that they're called something like, oh God, what are they called? They're called the Campaign for Ticketing Fairness.
Okay, CTF.
They sound great, don't they?
Yeah.
They're run by Viagogo and StubHub.
Oh,
isn't that great?
okay.
It's like when carbon footprint. That sounds interesting. Who came up with that? BP.
Campaign for climate change.
Lobbying is yes, exactly. Lobbying is incredible, but that group has sort of formed a particular effort to take down this policy, and there was a Guardian story about it last week where they've come up with £73,000. Again, lobbying is cheap at the price, isn't it?
Because, isn't it just?
Yeah, cheap to put pressure on MPs to sort of drop that policy
and make you millions upon millions for years after years.
Americans, by the way, would never countenance this. Like this 10% cap, even though I know some Americans who are coming to Europe to watch Taylor Swift, they would never countenance this. They kind of feel like, if you bought your tickets, it's your right to sell them on for whatever possible price you can get for them. And I just don't think that it's in their sort of, it's like cheap gas or something. It's in their, it's part of their birthright.
It's socialism.
Yeah, that is genuine socialism. Yeah. And yes, I'll fly over to watch her, but I won't actually allow that in my own country. But they would never put a cap on that.
But their fees are much more. I mean, we think our fees are huge in the UK, but it's somewhere around 15-20% here, and it can be up to 40-50%.
Well, it's like their airlines.
In the US.
It's a really big thing. All the hidden fees in the US is the
first tickets Ticketmaster ever sold. By the way, there's a terrific book called Ticketmasters, which is by Dean Bundick and Josh Barron, all about this. It's from a few years ago now, so it hasn't got the last few years, but it tells you all the kind of early stuff. Yeah, the first gig that Ticketmaster ever did was ELO in 1977, and they charged 25 cents on a $6.25 ticket, which is kind of doesn't sound crazy.
Yeah.
Again,
we don't live in that world anymore.
I'm not sure what you're doing.
Yeah,
but listen, I get that you can charge it. Yeah, now it's it's insane amounts. But
it can be 100% again.
Yeah, exactly. They can literally do what they want, and also they have dynamic pricing, much like Uber, which means that if tickets are going super quickly, they can suddenly the prices go up, and they've got an awful lot of ways that they can get more money out of you if they can see that the demand is growing. But the ticket scalpers is interesting, isn't it? Because the world in which ticket scalpers might work with
when you
the
say
resale
scalpers,
sites,
do you mean those people like? Oh yes, okay. The bots is. I mean, I don't know how they. I suppose you just have to mandate Ticketmaster to pay much more to stop that happening. Because I think,
happening. Yeah. But also whether because if I'm Viagogo and StubHub, and one of the things I need is resale tickets, and I need people to buy Taylor Swift tickets and give them to me, then there's not a lot of those people around, other than if you are setting out to make a deliberate campaign to buy a lot of Taylor Swift tickets that you don't want. So I'm not saying there is complicity, but certainly, it's
I'm
it's
saying a lot of
helps.
things after I bought my Taylor Swift tickets.
Yes,
I'm saying a lot of things, and I feel I'm entitled to.
Yeah.
I feel I've paid for that, right, Richard?
God, haven't you just?
I think that is it just doesn't seem to me possible that many people want to get rid of those. It's clearly not possible that many people, that you can get tickets for any night you want anywhere. And they are just at these insane resale prices.
You're not meeting anybody who said, who's yesterday said, great news, I've got 4 Taylor Swift tickets. And then the day after go, do you know what? Actually, I'm going to sell them to StubHub. Actually, now I think about it, my daughters I know really want to go. But, I just think StubHub, I worry about their margins. So it's where are those tickets coming from is very, very interesting. And also whether there's complicity of artists in that sometimes, which, by the way, on almost all occasions there isn't. No. But, again, it's a good way of making some extra money, the resale value of tickets. There's a lot going on. But the basic thing is Ticketmaster work by being exclusive to venues and exclusive to enough venues that, you have to go with them. And then, as you say, they did the clever thing of actually buying up loads of those venues anyway. So they can sort of charge what they want. And that's Merrick Garland's point, I think. Yes. And that monopolies, just saying sort of, we do this better than anybody. Therefore, which is the argument of a lot of enormous monopolies. Yeah. Google, we do search better than anybody. Yeah, I still think it's quite bad how it's ended up. So it's in everyone's interest to break these things down. Although I don't think antitrust has a great record recently in the US. It will be interesting to see it will take a long time to work through the system. Yeah, it feels like in a world in which that Taylor Swift tour sold out everywhere and it had all the problems we're talking about. It had the problems with buying the tickets. It had the problems of the prices of the tickets. It had the problems of the resales of the tickets. And it had the problems that there weren't 5 different places you could buy them. And yet it sold out everywhere around the world. So we are complicit in all of this. But if we want to do something, I guess you could put a cap, as you say, in certain foreign countries, they do that, and I guess it would help out. And acts do sometimes try and take Ticketmaster on. Pearl Jam famously did it in the 90s, and it nearly bankrupted Pearl Jam. But they're super powerful. So I just thought it was an interesting thing to talk about because I know people. We tend to dialogue with Ticketmaster 4 or 5 times a year, most of us, and each time we're like, how on earth are they making money? And then we forget about it again. So I think it's useful to know how that money is made. It's like childbirth. Once you got to the end of 10 hours of it, you're like, I don't want to think about it again. I've forgotten it. Yeah, that's like the same reason people would have a second child is the same reason they go back to Ticketmaster. Yeah. It's cheaper to actually go back to have a second child than to go back to Ticketmaster. Yeah. And I always have an epidural. Yeah. Always. Forget gas 3 days before. Yeah. Right. Should we go to a break now, Richard? Yes, let's do that. I wonder if it'd be Ticketmaster advertising. That would be awkward. Welcome back. We are now going to talk about the return of Loaded magazine. Now, Loaded magazine was part of the sort of lad culture that began in the 1990s, and then we'll talk about what happened. We'll talk about the switcheroo, what happened to it. And it was originally, I don't know if it was originally edited by James Brown, but the big kind of era of its pomp, it was edited by James Brown. It had terrific writing in, lots of sort of sexy women, pictures of sexy women in, they posed deliberately for them. And kind of with some clothes on. They weren't totally naked. Anyway, they're bringing it back. It fell out of favour, as you can imagine. Most magazines have fallen out of favour. Things do. The printed word has fallen out of favour. The printed word and the printed arse has fallen out of favour. And the editor, who's now a woman called Dani Levy, the new editor, she's a 39-year-old fitness influencer who lives in Spain. She says that the new version of Loaded's magazine goal is to bring back ogling for the 35 to 55-year-old men who are being cheated out of society. When can men look? Ogle. When are men going to be able to look at a naked person in our society is what I would like to know. I mean, there are so few opportunities. Someone should set up some sort of portal. Yeah, now if there was some way of transmitting it. Anyway, she says that whilst there's quite a lot of confusing stuff here, she says that whilst it was acceptable for women to be feminists, men don't have the equivalent freedom. There's a lot of PC gone mad stuff. Yeah. She then says a weird dichotomy has opened up in society where there's an attitude that no one can say or do anything, but then when you open social media, it's full of porn. Loaded is seeking to occupy the middle ground and say it's okay to appreciate beautiful women. Men need to have a safe place to read stuff like that and secretly relate to it. She also says, now this is the key line for me, we are targeting the original Loaded audience who are now living happily at home with their wife and kids, but still reminisce about their nights spent clubbing until 3 a.m, drinking £1 shots with a bedroom covered in posters of half-naked women. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's going to do great. Well, but it is, and I don't think it will work because for reasons we'll come to, but
that is totally the Adam Sandler Netflix play, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, people used to go and see this guy in the movie theatre and actually think, in their early 20s. The reason that guy's the biggest movie star in the whole world is because they are now living at home with their wife and children. They're not getting, it's expensive to get a babysitter. And Adam Sandler continues to make movies for them on this thing. And there is an element of that to this because the first cover star of this is Liz Hurley, brackets 59.
Wow.
There's no shame in it,
Good for her,
certainly.
yeah.
But yes, I don't know whether the photo is taken by her son Damien, who seems to do most of her photos. I've got a huge amount of time for that relationship.
What's that? Tell me about that.
You don't know about it? Okay.
No.
Liz Hurley's also has bikini ranges and things like that and promotes them via social media.
Bikini ranges, is that like a firing range but for bikinis?
Yeah. Yeah, she fires out bikinis at high speed. It's like a t-shirt cannon, but a bit sexier. And and Damien, her son, now a film director, we'll come to that in a second, takes all the photos. They're very sexy.
Really?
And it's wonderful. He does all the pictures. He's now directed her in I think it's called Strictly Confidential. Shoot me if I'm wrong. With a bikini, not an actual bullet.
With a bikini cannon.
Shoot me with a bikini gun.
The name of my new US punk.
And in which he had to direct his mother in a sex scene. But then they said, did you have an intimacy coordinator? No, we don't need any of that. I'm hugely here for their relationship, for everything about it.
That sounds very healthy.
It's hilarious. The whole thing is brilliant. I love it. Anyway, she's on the front of this magazine. So she is an original sort of loaded cover girl going back. And the cover lines are quite interesting because... I'll tell you what the cover lines are because you've got to become a member, by the way, which I think tells its own story, and then they'll post you the magazine.
Sorry?
It really is literally something. It's like the Gratin catalogue, isn't it? If you become a member, I will post you the magazine. Yeah.
That's like I once became a member of the Howard Jones fan club and they posted me a magazine.
Yeah.
That's
It's virtually the Pony Express.
I think that was 1981. Okay, you have to sign it. You have to be a member.
Yeah, okay. I think so. Okay. Obviously, they're using your data for something different. But
Right.
the cover lines are... Iron Mike versus Jake Paul. Obviously, that's the Tyson YouTuber fight. Inside Tyson's training camp. Yeah, we'll read.
Tick.
Bugsy Malone, the black brand behind the beats.
Yeah.
Okay, he's a British music success actor. We'll read that. How It Works, the MP. Now, that is an explainer culture of which I think we are part.
Yeah.
This podcast is part, so I can see why they've got that. And then Flashback Focus, Rogues Rehabilitated.
Oh, no, that's going to...
It's probably like, why everyone wants Danny Dyer to be the Prime Minister now, even though he once talked about, perhaps in one of these magazines, cutting somebody up, didn't he? Was it in?
Did he?
Oh, I think he did.
The headline will be, Wither Callum Best.
Yeah, but it's in a way more interesting what has happened to the women because... There were lots of women in those, and they're talking actually this. She said, one of the things she said is, I think there's no shame in men being able to ogle beautiful women, again, like Liz Hurley, Melinda Messenger, or Pamela Anderson. Melinda Messenger's about 53. Pamela Anderson has now sort of reinvented herself as a survivor of all this.
Yeah,
Pretty sure she doesn't necessarily want to do Loaded again. Liz Hurley, it's fine. She'll keep going. But it's interesting. The sort of the girls who are on it now, women, like Sarah Cox has got a great book club.
Yeah.
Kat Deely's doing This Morning.
Yeah.
Seen Caprice on the school run. Gail Porter, that ended much more sadly, that story. And I didn't say it ended, but she talks really moving about her time. I think FHM projected her famously looking over, she was totally naked, looking over her shoulder, and they projected her on the House of Parliament. Without her permission. Because that's really what happened, isn't it, with Loaded?
See,
it started as fun.
Yes, I think it's like that Onion headline, which is ironic porn viewing leads to unironic masturbation.
Yeah.
And it's hard for younger people listening to this to really overestimate how huge Loaded was. It sort of went off like a big bomb in 1994. Yeah. It's this huge thing. As you say, James Brown, not the singer, was the editor, and he'd been at the NME, and the press up to then had been sort of NME quite earnest, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
And he said, I want to do this magazine that's about the sort of, and there's like GQ. So he said, look, there were Savile Row suits and people in Bentleys.
Really smart.
And then there was, people in duffel coats, but there was nothing in the middle, which were the sort of men that he felt were being underserved. And so they set up Loaded, I think Tim Southwell as well, and Mick Bunnage. And
But I bought it for the articles.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know it sounds like a cliche, but the articles were brilliant.
It was a good magazine.
It was exuberant. It was kind of gonzo,
Funny.
We didn't really have that sort of. It was really and for a bit, and it seemed as though the girls could join in this culture.
I think that's the key thing. Is it started off and it was for men who should know better, and the new motto is for men who know better, and it was like sport, music, tech, and women. I think was the sort of the kind of order of things.
Yeah.
But women crept up and up that order as the years went by. And as you say, the likes of, brilliant broadcasters and smart women like Sarah Cox and Zoe Ball and Gail Porter sort of had to make themselves complicit with this because this was the culture. And I think it was run by white middle-class men who had kidded themselves that the problems of inequality were over. I think we were in the era of the end of history and Blair coming in, and we got rid of Thatcherism, we got rid of all this trouble, and the struggles of the 80s have paid off, and suddenly we were living in this world where everyone was free and equal, which sounds stupid, but every generation is uniquely stupid in their own way and uniquely clever in their own way. And I think that was a real blind spot for that generation. And so I think Loaded started, it had real energy, great ideas, full of great stuff. But I think it's, that sort of celebration of laddishness very slowly turned into misogyny, and no one noticed it happening.
I totally agree with you. I remember when I first stopped being secretary at The Sun, I went on to picture research for features, and it was my job to be in contact with all of these magazines. And when they got their new issues came out each month, they would give you their best pictures, and then you would have to run them with a tiny picture of the magazine covers. And the pictures were they were expensive photo shoots. They looked really, they weren't sort of a mess, but it went more and more and more down market, and then it got into like high street honeys, and then it got into and you can see there was a sort of switcheroo, and you suddenly saw that instead of being actually part of it, the same thing, oh dear, it's happened again.
Yeah.
I'm afraid sexism has happened again.
Yes.
Who could have predicted after so many millennia of it that it would happen again?
We thought we'd wiped down every surface, and it's come back.
I don't know how there's any of this left, but here we are. And you can see the bloodline between that and the noughties, where it becomes absolute, where celebrity culture of the noughties is all the kind of absolute train wreck, Britney Spears being followed and having her period day knickers photographed, and every kind of tiny, like a truly hateful form of toxicity for women. And that I'm afraid there is a bloodline. And actually a lot of those women who, some of the ones we've mentioned earlier, who so many are doing really interesting things, have talked really interestingly about how they felt and how when they realised, oh, hang on, I am not being allowed into the joke. I am in a way the joke.
Yeah.
And I don't have any power in this situation at all, actually. And they all, and the magazines themselves, I'm trying to remember all their names, Arena, Sky, FHM. I mean, they all, and then of course the later ones, which were very much more naughties, which was Zoo and Nuts.
Zoo and Nuts, and they were sort of weekly versions of Loaded, and they very much led on the women angle again, and bizarre stories and showbiz and stuff like that. But that's when W.H. Smith and people started saying, we can't actually put these magazines out, you're going to have to put them in a cover or stick them on the top shelf. That's how it went.
And Heat magazine had become, which people thought was quite jolly and fun when it launched, really quickly became that circle of shame, where all female body parts were kind of circled, and it was like, you've got cellulite, you've got you've got sweat patches, all these sort of things. Women became a sort of collection of circlable body parts. And the sort of success stories and those late 90s things were OK Magazine and Hello Magazine, well, particularly OK Magazine, where Richard Desmond was like, let's do it like Hello Magazine, but actually have it like I don't know who any of these Eurotrash royals are. We don't want any of that. Let's just get footballers and people off the telly.
Do you know that the receptionists at OK weren't allowed to say hello when they answered the phone?
Weren't they?
No, because it was a rival.
Okay, so, but yeah, I mean, Richard Desmond obviously had certain issues with women as well. He ran a massive porn empire. So anyhow, but it's interesting, the idea that this can be revived. And I thought the way the cover looks, actually, it doesn't look so kind of loud and explosive. Yeah. It looks a little bit like something like, I don't know, W Magazine or something like that, but with slightly less, with an oblique, a slanted headline. But other than that, it looks quite smart. But obviously, what has happened is that that bloodline that we're talking about that came from these magazines to the kind of horribleness of the noughties culture, then it goes on to people like, it goes on, I think, through people like Neil Strauss. Do you know that guy who wrote a book called The Game?
Oh,
it's really
yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's the Game is a story about. I think he wrote for Rolling Stone magazine. I remember talking to the former editor about this once, and Neil Strauss went and heard about these people called the pickup artist community, like people who could sort of teach you how to get with women that you felt were way out of your league. And he ends up actually getting so deep into this that he ends up living in a house with them, and these people become a big, big thing. And a lot of it is by insulting women, negging them, all this sort of stuff. And actually lots of these people, lots of the sort of Trump supporters, lots of, Andrew Tate come out of this world. And so I do slightly think you could trace a not very difficult family tree down from all of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to blame the people behind the launch edition of Loaded in 1994 for what's happening in our culture.
No.
But you can't. There is a...
We've all done things that we didn't know where they'd lead.
Yes, exactly.
But as it's been described, I can't think it'll last very long, this thing, unless the data is used for something else, and that's why it's being run as a membership thing. But it's not really a lads mag. It's like a dad's mag. It's a Generation X dad's mag.
Yeah, well, lads are dads now, aren't they? Well, and lads, I mean, are granddads now.
Yes, and I don't know whether they would. Will they spend money on this? I don't want to say young people don't spend money on magazines, because there's some amazing publications out there for young people. There's a really good one, by the way, which I want to give a plug for. But have a look at The Fence, which is
I love The Fence.
It's terrific. It's written by young people. It's edited by it's
edited by young people. It's
I'm sorry, but everything else is so gerontocratic that it's and they've come from nowhere. They've created this thing, and it's got really interesting, fun articles. It's got such an attitude. It's got a great newsletter that you can subscribe to. Anyway, I think that's brilliant, and people are buying that in print editions. And as we talked about before, that people are buying things. I don't think they're going to buy this thing.
But it is fascinating, and again, for a lot of people who were not around in the 90s, it feels like once again we'll never see that thing again where you can launch a magazine. Happened with Viz in the 80s, happened with Loaded in the 90s. And again, there's similar DNA there, funnly enough. But
I love Viz. Viz guys are my friends, Viz. And I utterly love them.
100%. But in terms of the humour and in terms, where you could suddenly launch a magazine and it was selling 500,000 copies. You know, I mean, they
were selling 1 million at one point.
I mean, it's
insane.
Viz was selling 1 million, which is incredible. By the way, the Viz story, which I think is Simon Donald wrote, is a great book.
It's brilliant.
About the history
and they're
of Viz.
Such great people. Yeah. They could not be nicer.
So it's it's weird when you think, I think back to Loaded and Gary Oldman was on the front cover. I'm sure I bought the first one, and now to be talking about it as a cultural artifact and as a sort of weird archaeological find and something that represents a culture which has disappeared in its own way but has been blown up in other ways, is such a peculiar thing, because it's the same lifetime, this two things happening, this incredible success of this magazine, and now
the same people on the front,
and it was certainly a thing for a few years, and I imagine the people who launched it, you've got to give them credit and kudos for spotting a gap in the market and building a huge business. But it very, very quickly tailed off into what we see today. I don't think we can blame them, but it certainly didn't help.
But as I say, it is that thing where of just trying to service that same older generation in the same way that Netflix has done, or when you look at the list of those top 10 movie stars, and they're the sort of people who they're in their 60s. Yeah. And the cover star of this is nearly in her 60s. There's something, I don't think there's something that particularly healthy about a culture when these are the new things being launched.
That's where venture capital money is from. And it's our generation launching things that we think people will love and brands we think people will love. And then you have to understand that almost every single person you walk past in the street has never heard of it.
Yeah.
And at some point you have to get out of the way, I think.
Get out of the way, Loaded.
That said, I hope you're enjoying our podcast.
Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to something that isn't going to collapse in 6 months? Big prediction here. Netflix.
Oh man, you're going to sound stupid at Christmas if it does.
Yeah, I'm going to have some egg on my face.
We'll play that back in our bloopers episode. Here's the hilarious moment when Marina failed to see The demise of Netflix.
Now, Netflix have recently released their viewing figures for the second half of 2023. They have never, for years and years, people wanted them to say how many people are watching, and for various reasons, namely that they didn't think it was that many, they didn't release them. And once it became like, by the way, we've won the streaming wars levels of people, they released them. And so we've now got the figures for the second half of 2023. And that's for the movies that are on Netflix, some of which they make and some of which they don't, and the various TV shows. It is obviously the world's global TV channel, which makes it very interesting, because one of the things that I was sort of fascinated by is that these detective series or crime series that come from the individual countries, Who is Erin Carter? That's a British one. Lupin, the French one. In the old days, I suppose, on the BBC or whatever, you might have had lots of different regional detective series. In fact, Alan Partridge makes a joke about that at one point.
Spender.
Yeah. Yeah. Bergerac.
Yeah, Bergerac.
Spectre Morse. But now you've got...
Let's name detectives.
For how long? But now you have regions that are basically Netflix territories, and they do unbelievable numbers, these shows. And they're really hugely watched around the world. And so I think that... Should we start? What do you want to start with, TV or movies, and what people watch?
What do you want to start with? Should we start with TV, because we were just talking
about
it?
All right, because we were just talking about it.
Yeah.
Let's go. Those licensed titles. Now, these are things that Netflix didn't make, but Suits, the biggest TV show in the world, which continues because there's 9 seasons of it, starring forgotten actress Meghan Markle.
Meghan Markle, what happened to her?
Yeah, whatever happened to? Write in if you know. And things like Grey's Anatomy, Young Sheldon, Gilmore Girls. I mean, some of these are quite ancient programs. Not Young Sheldon, they're not so old, but things like Gilmore Girls. But
Gilmore Girls I've just been introduced to.
Have you?
It's great.
Oh, you're so lucky.
Yeah,
it's really wonderful.
Yeah,
it's really wonderful. And it was so formative, so formative for a lot of people.
Well, it's going to be formative for me, I
Yes,
think.
it is.
Yeah.
You can still have formative things happen to you now.
Yeah, of course you can.
Absolutely. So those shows do huge numbers for Netflix. I'm amazed, actually, that they've renewed that 3-body problem, because as we talked about it on that show, that is so expensive. I don't think it did that well. We'll have to find out next year, because they've released it. One of the other things I thought was so fascinating is that thing. I mean, one of the earliest things we talked about on this podcast was Squid Game, The Challenge, which was very well made, but I found super bleak. A show that is essentially a critique of capitalism was in the most capitalistic way made into a game show. Well, I have egg on my face again, because Squid Game The Challenge increased viewership for the original Squid Game by 34%, which bear in mind, that is Netflix's almost their biggest show.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary how it put that back into the Korean original.
Yeah, the Squid universe.
Yeah.
And it's, that long tail thing is fascinating. When you talk about the 3-body problem, which didn't do enormous numbers and was very expensive, I think that they need the odd marquee thing just to bring people onto the site. But such a huge amount of the viewing.
But why, increasingly? Why do they? I don't even understand why they do. When you see what makes all the things, if you've got a bought-in or a UK sort of crime thing that doesn't have big stars in, isn't that expensive, and has been watched 51 million times.
Well, because it's the same reason why, shops don't put their white T-shirts in the shop window.
No.
Do they? But when you go in, that's what you're buying.
But I just want to clear past all I want to clear past 3-body problem. But their biggest titles of all time, which are Squid Game, Wednesday, and Red Notice, this thing, the biggest show of TV, which I've never actually seen.
The biggest movie, yeah. It's their biggest movie of all time.
But those people keep coming. They've got really long tails, and people keep coming back to them. And I guess they will even more when there are season 2s of particularly of the TV, which there's definitely going to be.
Well, I think Red Notice is fascinating. So that's Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot is in it. And it's one of those movies. It's Rawson Marshall Thurber, who did Dodgeball, did various other things, Central Intelligence. So it's a movie. I was really thinking about Fall Guy when I was looking at Red Notice. So Red Notice opened for like a week in the cinemas, did not do great numbers, doesn't have great numbers on Rotten Tomatoes, but is the biggest movie of all time on Netflix. Now, if The Fall Guy had not opened in the cinemas, but had opened on Netflix instead and had done this, it would be seen as this enormous success. I think The Fall Guy would live forever and ever and ever on Netflix. It's perfect for
it's going
that
to stream.
audience.
That's the thing about The Fall Guys. It's going to streaming 3 weeks after it's been in theatres because it shut the bed.
It's
It's
gone to video on demand.
Oh, well,
which is different. So you have to pay to watch it.
Yeah, but it's
and then it will. But that's interesting. So with the Thursday Murder Club, and which we're filming very soon, and Netflix have put a lot of money into that, and so you never know if you're going to have a theatrical release, right? Some things just don't get released theatrically, and every filmmaker and every actor wants to have a theatrical release. They want the film to be out in the cinemas. That's because that's what we grew up with. That feels like the exciting thing. But if you're going to open for a week, if you're going to be Mad Max Furiosa or The Fall Guy and make a great movie, and then people say, "Oh God, it only made $25 million," and it be seen as a flop, wouldn't you rather just open on Netflix and be red notice and be watched for the next 3 years and be their biggest movie ever?
But we know why. Well, yes, I would, but we know why they open theatrically, because you can't be considered for the awards unless you've had a theatrical run, and it's what I think is interesting as well from this data dump that they've done is that the so-called, what I would consider their awards movies, maybe because they were nominated for awards and they were quite clearly made with awards in mind. Prestige stuff like Naiad, that one with Jodie Foster, the swimmer, Maestro, Al Conde, all those things.
Rustin, which was Oscar nominated.
No one really cares that much.
Yeah,
no one on the platform really cares that much.
They're not even close to
Society
the
of
top
the
100.
Snow did really well, the one about the the Uruguayan plane crash. Last year, All Quiet on the Western Front performed brilliantly for them and was watched again and again and again. And, as a foreign language film, it's even bigger. But the really big movie is straight to Netflix. And it's produced by a couple, again, who I don't know what happened to them, Barack and Michelle Obama.
Oh, yeah.
Leave the World Behind. Now, that had 121 million views. That's Julia Roberts. It pretty much helps if you've got on the little tile, you've got Julia Roberts' face. Ethan Hawke, Mahershala Ali, I can't remember who else is in it, but that has done incredibly, but that has not had a theatrical release.
Yeah, that was good, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's bleak.
Yeah, that is pretty bleak, yeah. Heart of Stone, a Gal Gadot, maybe, what's that, 110 million? Adam Sandler, there he is, the banker. Leo, 96 million views.
Yeah, Adam Sandler had two, because he had the You're So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah, but also his Murder Mystery 2, which was released like 2 years ago, is still right up there as well.
Well, that's literally why they pay him the big bucks.
Yeah, he's very bankable. But yeah, the fascinating thing with Netflix is that you have not heard of almost all of the shows that are the biggest things on the platform.
But why are they making the awards movies if engagement, as they say, is their only, is what they're going for? That's the kind of sine qua non of everything they do.
I think it's a lost leader. I think it's to say we are still a prestige brand. We are still something, they want to get, people, whatever company they run, they still want to be written about in the trades, right? They want to be written about in the New York Times. They want to be written about in the Sunday Times. And they are only going to write about your brand new thing with Benedict Cumberbatch in it. They are not going to write about the fact that you bought a 5-year-old drama from ITV,
but which
Smith.
is for streaming. That is not for theatrical. That's if you're talking about the puppet one, written by the brilliant Abby Morgan. But Netflix. I mean, I think Ted Sarandos is going to get talked about anyway. He's only get talked about more than his co-CEO, but he is going to get talked about. I'm not quite sure. I wonder if there'll be a point where they think, why are we doing this? Or whether they are able to sufficiently lobby the Academy and say, why does there have to be theatrical release? Why can we not have an Oscar for this movie that, by the way, how many people have seen and that we've created and is a completely new thing? So they may be able to do that. Another thing that's interesting, the biggest bankers in the entire world of streaming are Hollywood studio-made, not made by Netflix, animated movies.
Yeah.
They are a money hose, okay? So the biggest ones they did last year, these are the top 10. Paw Patrol, Leo, Boss Baby. Boss Baby, I mean, how old is that? That's
amazing,
ancient.
isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, Minions, Rise of Gru, Trolls, Sing and Sing 2, Hotel Transylvania, Super Mario Brothers is only down there because it was right at the very end of the year, and obviously it will go hugely bigger, Shrek, and Shrek 2. Now, that is an eternal money spinner, those things. And so if now, as they've, I mean, this week, there's a movie, Garfield, the movie that was opened that my children are seeing today, has only cost something like $60 million. That's really cheap.
Yeah.
Imagine when they're doing it with AI. I'm sorry, that's a terrible thing to say, but it is realistic. It's animation. It will be even cheaper. And then it will continue to make money
Forever and
forever and ever and ever.
Well, I mean, years ago, 20 years ago or something, this idea of the long tail came out, which is, you create product that keeps making you money forever in the same way.
Well, that's what Disney was.
That's exactly. And publishing has always known that. Agatha Christie has made money forever and ever. And actually being in the television industry at that time, you were slightly thinking, I don't really see that because I don't see where this stuff is sitting. I don't really see where we are going to be making our money in 20 years' time. And now, of course, you've got this incredible sort of streaming libraries where you go, oh, well, of course we can make money forever and ever and ever.
Yeah,
exactly. So I was always obsessed with what are we doing next? What are we doing next? And the people who were building up libraries of programs, I was kind of, what are you doing? And of course, they were the geniuses. And
where are you going to put it? Yeah,
I was just enjoing myself.
Christmas movies they're slightly eclipsing Hallmark.
Yeah.
They get huge numbers. And that's those millennial Christmas movies they make with people like Lindsay Lohan. I think they're quadrupling their output next year because even though everyone sort of clips these things and say, oh my God, this is the worst VFX I've ever seen, Lindsay Lohan suffering a sort of ski trauma, which means she forgets loses her memory or whatever it is.
That's a good film, by the way.
I worry about your taste sometimes, but it needs eggnog. If you have eggnog, it's a great movie. So those movies, but they do huge numbers for them, and people, they start their holiday season on whenever it is, and it doesn't have to be particularly well made, as evidenced.
Marina, I have an idea. I've just made us both billionaires. Okay.
You do this every week.
Yeah, we do it doesn't seem to have happened yet, does it?
Yeah. Well, this time next year.
We do an animated Christmas character movie called Eggnog.
Voiced by Lindsay Lohan?
Voiced by Lindsay Lohan.
God, it's like it's a 4-quadrant movie, Richard.
I guess Eggnog is sort of a bit like
it's one of the quadrants.
It's a bit like a minion.
Yeah.
An eggnog.
Oh, yes.
They're like little creatures.
Well, Minions, that's probably the biggest movie of the year.
Yeah.
Next year, we should go through all the movies at the start of the year, and I will tell you which ones I think will be hits and flops. Because
hold on, let me write that down. So the start of next year,
January, we're going
to go through every single movie that comes out.
The things that are coming out on the weekends.
And you are going to tell us which is a hit.
And say, yeah.
And then every now and again, we'll
I'll
check
have to keep looking at the tracking, but yeah, whether it's going to...
There's an awful lot of caveats to this statement you had. That was a very bold statement.
Yeah, because it's a nuanced show. It's a nuanced show. So I'm not just going to shout it out, like put it on a stone tablet. We're going to talk around
Your
these
bit of the show is nuanced.
No, it's not.
Mine isn't. Eggnogs, a bit like Minions, but for Christmas. Christmas Minions.
Yes, Christmas. Okay,
Eggnogs.
That's a really good idea.
That's a really good idea. Okay, I'm going to talk to Netflix.
Okay, you must do. While we're on the subject of Netflix, I just want to say one thing while we're sort of finishing this off, because it's so interesting that there's been other Netflix news which we haven't ended up talking about because we've had lots of other things. But Netflix recently said, we think we're going to start paying creators on how successful their shows are. And which is becoming so interesting because, of course, this is what happened when you made a show for a television network.
Yeah.
If your show was successful, you get paid more. Whereas Netflix, in order to disrupt the market and get creators to come to them, because no one really wanted to necessarily work for this tech firm, they said they paid these huge amounts of money. And now they're like, yeah, we're not going to pay those anymore. Also, we're going to schedule things. Have you noticed that, we're going to have some ads?
Yeah, we're going to schedule things. We're going to have ads. We're going to pay you more if your show does better.
You're starting to look so like something I dimly remember called a television channel.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to have sport as well, by the way.
Yeah, we're going to have sport. We're going to have the sport, by the way, the sports adjacent stuff, the Beckham documentaries, all things like that did really, really well. I
mean, listen, they know their business, don't they? But yeah, it's interesting. The data dump is not in a particularly user-friendly way. It's an enormous 16,000-page Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, they literally want to hit you over the head with it.
But it's out there if you want to see it. That's like when governments deliver bad news, they deliver it in a 1,000-page report rather than a 20-page report. Yeah,
there's a bit in a Martin Amis novel where he's trying to destroy his friend's life, and he sends him the copy of the LA Times, which at that point was about a foot deep on a Sunday, and says, "I thought you might be interested in this." So his friend has to, read through the whole thing. Which bit do you possibly mean? Trying to send him mad.
Yeah. In the information.
That is.
And then annoyingly for him, his friend does actually find a reference to him somewhere, which infuriates him. So the biggest TV show, and I haven't seen it, I'm going to go straight home and watch it now, is One Piece. Yes. Which is based on the manga series. And again, there's so much stuff out there, but because of the algorithm, because when you go on the front page of Netflix, you see a certain group of programs which you think is Netflix, and it isn't. That's your Netflix. And other people's front pages are completely different to yours. And for most people in the world, One Piece is on the front page of their of Netflix. And for me, I've never seen it, but it's the biggest show in the world.
It's strange how it's actually managed that, because on some of their big things like Three Body Problem, you know you're being shown it, even though you have no interest in this, simply because they have spent that much money on it. They always say they don't, and it's only show. Yeah, but it's like, you do though. You do. Prove you don't.
Yeah, prove you don't.
Prove you don't. Prove you don't.
Come on the show.
By all means, come on the show.
And prove you don't, because we have got a Christmas animation to pitch to you.
Yeah.
What
Live, on air.
Someone at Netflix will be
It'll be the greatest meeting ever. It's with an American.
So yeah, just go, eggnogs. I love eggnogs. This is huge. And then like in 2 years' time, we go, well, with Ted Sarandos when he quit the business, didn't he? Like the day after.
Literally nothing, no eggnog movie.
Someone will be listening. Someone will listen. I think we could do it. We could put it together. They have to save Christmas. That was fun. We introduced a whole new generation to Loaded. Apologies for that.
Apologies.
Netflix shows we've never heard of.
Yes.
And
I must go home and watch.
And we've heard your Taylor Swift trauma.
Yes. Well, you'll be hearing plenty more about that between now and June the 22nd.
I look forward to it ever so much.
Anyway, please join us again on Thursday. The address, which is email,
email. So what does E stand for?
Is therestisEntertainment@gmail.com. And please send us more of your brilliant questions and we will endeavour to answer them.
We'll see you all on Thursday.
Bye-bye.